Hello, and welcome to another episode of Casting Views. I'm Lou, and I'm here with Dan, and this is the podcast where we take a bit of a random subject each week and, well, cast some views. So this week, we decided to go to the polls, and we put it out on Twitter, and it came back that the subject of choice that people wanted us to talk about was gaming and kind of our history with gaming. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with you because you are slightly older and so therefore probably have a little bit more experience in different types of gaming from the earlier days. And then I feel like, I'll interject when it becomes applicable for me.
This is where my age comes in handy on this. Yeah, no, so the poll gaming one, I was going to ask for a recount, but I actually was pleased gaming one. So the results stood. I want to talk about the history of gaming rather than our history, sorry, of gaming rather than just specific games. I go back to, so my first computer was the Commodore 64. I mean, are you aware of that one or?
Yeah, I've heard of the Commodore 64, wouldn't be able to tell you what one looked like.
Well, they called it. His nickname was the bread bin, because it kind of looked like a big doorstop bread bin. Yeah, so it was an 8-bit computer, and I remember my dad got it. He bought it off someone. It was kind of like hand, and it was a bag full of cassettes because it came with a tape deck, and the games were on cassette. So yeah, no instant loading. It'd take like minutes. I can't remember exactly, but games literally you'd be sitting there. Basically, what you would do, you'd get the tape going, you'd go away, you'd have something to eat, or you'd go watch some TV, and then come back, and you'd hope it load because sometimes they would fail if there was a bit of dirt on the tape head, or you'd sometimes have to realign. There was like a little screw or something that you'd adjust, and if that wasn't lined up right, you'd be waiting like 5 minutes and the game wouldn't load. Yeah, the pain was real. But the thing about it was that the games were really cheap. I think the budget games were 1.99 or 2.99, and if I remember right, the top like premium games were 9.99, which as a kid then was quite a lot.
Yeah, that's not bad. I mean, it's different from today's like retail price of like 65 quid in it for like a mainstream release.
But what it meant was though, because I think anyone could put out games, especially early on. It felt I think you had loads of people doing them in the bedroom, but that did mean you got a load of dross as well. But I, but I used to remember like going down to the newsagent because yeah, at the time then even like we had Woolworths, which probably would be in shops that you don't have on the high street anymore. So they would do it. I think they were in WH Smith. I think Boots even sold computer games at the time. Yeah, so that was my first computer, and my first game I ever played was Rambo: First Blood Part Two.
That's a very you game to play, isn't
It
it?
was, it was. It's probably like the Call of Duty at the time. But these games were very simple affairs. So they were like, obviously you can imagine the graphics quite basic, but decent for the time, I think. And they were like either single screen games that flipped over or just sort of like side scrolling levels that repeated. And this was basically one level. And if you knew what to do, you could probably do it in a couple of minutes and then it would just repeat. And that was it. It would say, right, now you've got to go save some more hostages or something. And it would just repeat. But the loading screen, it was great because when that was it. When the games loaded, they just had loads of flashing lights. It was like imagine just a screen full of lines of random lights just flashing all over the place. But then some games would have like a graphic of the game in on it. So for Rambo, it filled in each line, and it was a picture of him holding the classic the like the rocket propelled grenade launcher from the film with the theme tune. But yeah, and then what it was, I think it was Konami. I think they introduced, and this is how long games took to load. Right, they introduced the ability to play a game like Space Invaders while the game itself was loading.
Because you could complete a full game of that before like
So can you imagine that you're playing a game while a game is loading? There was other sort of similar systems. My cousin had a VIC 20. It was a Commodore again. It was a VIC 20, and he had there was a game called Tour de France, which obviously was based on the Tour de France, but we called it a joystick waggler. And by that I mean there were a number of games where you'd have to waggle the joystick left and right, like an athletics game to make the character run. And this was, I think, to make the bike accelerate. We each had our own joystick because then you had imagine like an Xbox or PlayStation controller, but there was a whole market of them, and you'd find the one that suited you. And so we would swap between each level because this was like it took it out of you. I mean, as a kid, this was our exercise, and we'd swap the joysticks. And I remember at one point, because the joystick port was next to the power lead, when we'd got like the furthest in the game, I knocked the power lead out instead of unplugging the joystick, and an actual fight ensued between me and my cousin. We had a fight. And another game I had is it was called Chase HQ, and it was like a police car game. And the first part of the level was you chasing up to a criminal, and then the second part was you had to damage them in a set amount of time. And on the Commodore 64, I think it was probably one of the worst ports of it, but you had to load each level. So you'd load the first level. If you completed it, you'd have to you'd have to load the next level on the tape. And then if you completed that, you'd have to load. So at one point, you'd have to flip the tape over. And when it got to that, the game would always crash for me. But I loved the game so much, I was playing it. But then one time, it actually worked. But my muscle memory was to turn the computer off, and I did. So I think I actually threw the tape out when it did that because I thought I can't do that anymore. But yeah, so these were like I said, these were games you got all sorts because like I said, they were $1.99, so people were just churning them out.
So back then, was gaming generally pretty accessible? So like, were like systems, so like a Commodore 64, what was price kind of, see what we'll get an adjuster as well, see how much it would be kind
Yeah,
of
have a
today
look.
as
Have a
well.
look. I'm not. Do you know what? I'm not sure. I actually loved it. I bought recently the mini Commodore 64, and it, brought back some memories. But it's never the same. They had Ghostbusters on it, which I absolutely loved, and they had the theme tune at the start with the lyrics that you could sing along to it karaoke style with a little ball that bounced along on the lyrics. But have you got the price there?
Yeah, so I've got American prices. So $595, and that's the equivalent of 1,600 in 2020. I
Wow.
think the price did drop. I think they said that it dropped to 300, and then some stores were selling it as low as 200. But that's a hell of a lot of money, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, at the time.
But it was also kind of marketed as a computer, as something to work with. I remember you got a huge manual with it, and it gave you certain things to code. And I remember once coding it was like, I don't know, it felt like to me 20 pages of code just to get a crappy hot air balloon flying around the screen, like a pixel, about 10 pixels wide and high, and that was it. But you felt like a coder. I did that. Do you know what I mean? I knew the system. Yeah, there were kind of others. The other big one there was a Spectrum, and my cousin also had one made by Amstrad, and I remember that. Just a quick story on that before I move on. That only had one joystick port, right? And he would we used to love playing football games, and he had Emily Hughes soccer for any of you old ones out there who knows who Emily Hughes is, but also his football game. So we bought a joystick splitter, and what it was a dongle you plugged into the joystick port, which then had two plugs, and you'd plug a joystick into each one.
Right.
But because this is technology back then, you'd get interference between the two. So say he was on the ball, if I pushed up at the right minute, I could make him spoon the shot or make his character move. And we had one game, it literally lasted 3 hours because I think we kept drawing the game because we could always make the other person miss the shot. Oh man, it was
It's like
ins-
split screen cheating, but like the original version of it.
with gaming. I was quite competitive, and like neither of us wanted to lose, so we would always get to the penalty. And if it went to penalties, that would just last forever. But yeah, we had to have a joystick port splitter, and you'd get joystick interference. That's what we were dealing with back in the day. So then I moved on to another Commodore system, Commodore Amiga. And if you're having a look up the Amiga 1000. That's the one I had, and look at the beast of a unit that was. So it was like it was a huge kind of, again, a box. The keyboard was sit under it, and you would have like a big CRT monitor with it. So it had its own monitor with it. Now, again, my dad bought it off someone with a load of games, so got it sort of fairly cheap. This was like next gen, and the graphics were so much better. So do you see a picture of it?
What's it called? Sorry,
The Amiga 1000.
Amiga 1000. Everybody at home is going to be googling this along
Yeah.
with us.
Now it had half a mega RAM, which was amazing. Right, half a meg. Mine had the expansion module that fit in the side to give it a full mega RAM. Yes, a full mega RAM. But what it was this big metal box, right? and you could hear the circuit board inside it was loose. So if I banged my desk, it wobbled the circuit board inside, which then crashed the computer. So you had to.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing it. Well, jeez, yeah, that is one big thing.
For me, of course, the graphics are obviously much better. It had a disk drive, so you had floppy disks for people who remember what floppy disks were. So games loaded much quicker. But for me, what I loved about it, again, the games and had proper manuals.
Oh yeah.
But with that change in gen, you obviously had an increase in price. So I think budget games for that were around the £5 to £10 mark, and the premium games were 20 to 25, which again were like huge for me. But I was able to save up and get the odd couple. Again, a couple of standout things for this was actually I'm laughing at one. I'm going to do that one first because I had a mate who was who was into gaming, and I'd go stay around his house. And what I would do is, now you used to like bring the PlayStation memory card,
Yeah.
or you could fit your console in your bag. I would bring that, and you've seen the size of it. I would take a rucksack, and I'd be putting the monitor, the base unit, and I'd be literally transporting that to his house. Because it was again on disc, and there was so much, like, pirating was quite rife then. Not that I had any games that were pirated, of course. Pirating was rife. Games would come with like a copyright system, not a copyright system, sorry, like an anti-pirate system. And what that would be is it would either say, at some point in the game, it would say, right, give us the first letter of the second word of the first line on page 221. And the game would just stop, and until you did the right letter, and if you didn't do it right, it wouldn't let you progress. And then they cottoned on to some people would photocopy it. So they then started printing like the manuals or these things on coloured paper. So if you photocopied it, it wouldn't come out. But the best one was there's a game called Leisure Suit Larry, which is about basically a sleazeball.
Yeah, I
And
was
that
about to say, Jesus.
do you know that game? You heard of that
I
one?
don't, but it sounds awful.
Yeah, it was a point and click adventure. You had to be, I think it was an over 18 game even back then. Its age verification was it would ask you questions of the time, like, I don't know, who were the Beatles or something, and who's Bob Dylan. It would ask you questions, which again you just need to. And back then we didn't have the internet, of course, so you couldn't just look it up. You just needed to know someone who had it. So it wasn't a great way of keeping out underage gamers.
Could you imagine them doing that now? It's like, who's the current prime minister?
Yeah.
What was it?
What was the second Adele album? Ed Sheeran is a chef, B, a pop singer. Going back to this, like I said, two things about it. Piracy was rife, and so much so that you'd get groups of people that were pirating the game and giving them
Yeah.
out. They would actually put a splash screen in front of the game saying, "We've cracked this game. Give us some money if you want." So basically, they're actually saying, we're proud to have done this, and they do a proper splash screen.
See, I guess as well, because coding was generally a bit more simple back then. I guess it was just an easier thing to do. I don't know the last time I would have ever seen a bootleg copy of like a game for like a games console. I don't think it would have happened in my generation.
Well, that was it. You had, if I go back to the Commodore 64, because it was a tape system, all you needed was a twin tape deck and a blank tape, and that was it. You put it, you
And
put
you
the
literally
game.
just copy it over,
Yeah,
a bit like a like a cassette tape that you would just copy music from.
yeah. And early disc games, you could even just copy it across because you could back
So,
up.
so how did people get like the fakes out then? So so for instance, I know you said that like even Boots and Woolworths were selling copies of the legit game. Was it the like independent news agent that had like bootleg copies?
No, it was always someone in the playground. It was
Oh,
someone who knew.
right.
Yeah, it was always someone in the playground. I think at the time, because it was just so right, you always knew someone who knew someone whose cousin could get you a bag full of games or something. We talk about this, and I was saying about loading. Another memory is, imagine if this happened now, right? There was a game. It was called Monkey Island 2. It was a point and click adventure. It came on 11 floppy disks. 11.
But like, how long was the actual game? So like, how long was the playthrough of the game?
It depended on the game, like that, because it was an adventure game. Now you got to remember, again, like I said, you didn't have the internet at the time to look at walkthroughs. So if you were stuck on
Yeah.
a game, you either had to know someone who could help you. You had to either persevere, you had to give up, or get this right. I was going to bring it up at the end, but you had, in the back of manuals for certain games, you had tip line, and you had to phone the tip line up, and it would charge you like, yeah, it would charge you about £1 a minute or something. and it would say, and because it's charging you £1 a minute, it would take 5 minutes to introduce the phone line. So you're already 5 minutes in before it even asks you what bit of the game you're stuck on. And they would pay someone. There's I can't remember the name of the documentary, but it's on Netflix. Someone who was paid to, you had two varieties. You either had a recorded message where someone read out the part of the game and what to do, or you had, I think Nintendo had like like the Apple geniuses, they had someone you'd call up, you'd be put through to someone, and you'd say, "Right, I'm stuck on this game. How do I get past it?" And they'd tell you how. So some
So it
would
was like
be,
the very early days of like IGN.
yeah. It was a walkthrough, but on the phone that your parents killed you when they got the phone bill. And I admit I had to do it on a couple of games. I can't remember the games, but these these adventure games, they were like they've got really obscure puzzles. So I think they did it intentionally. They didn't want you to be able to solve it.
Because then you're ringing the fucking tip line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tip number one is don't call that line. But it was a great system. And it's probably, I'd have to say, it was probably my all-time favorite gaming system, because that's what introduced me to like sensible soccer. Now I still maintain you can have your FIFAs and you can have your Pro Evo or eSport or whatever it's called now. Give me old school sensible soccer on a two-button joystick, and that's all I need.
Top view, bird's eye view.
Yeah. And that was it. And it's got my all-time favorite game as well, called Wings, on it, which is set in World War I, I think it was. But again, really simple, but just really atmospheric. So again, for me, that was like, now, when we talk about next gen jumps, that for me was everything, because I went from tape to a disc. The graphics were just amazing, and it had two joystick ports, so you didn't have to you didn't have to fight. Now I'm going to jump about a bit. Then I did some PC gaming, so I got one for college. I needed one for school and college. So I did some PC gaming, and that was mainly like a football manager games. But then I got my first console. Now, the thing I realized when I was going through this, I missed a big chunk of famous consoles, and I never had a Sega Master System, I never had a Mega Drive, and I never had an NES or a SNES. But I knew mates who did, and I'm trying to think why I never got around to ever having one of those. But I think I was just really happy with the Commodore 64, the Amiga,
Yeah.
and then on the PC. Yeah, so we'll skip through just so we can get to you, because this is where you come in a little bit on this one.
Well, do you know what's weird as well, just about that generation?
Yeah.
Like, how many companies were actually producing like gaming consoles almost, or not consoles, but like gaming systems? Because I feel like there was a wider variety of people that tried it. Like you
Well,
just said, there was something made by Amstrad.
yeah. I mean, I'm not necessarily. I can't remember. Ages dim my memory, but um, you didn't. You had a few, but you didn't have a hell of a lot. So you had in the like the home computer, in quotes, home computer market. You had two really. When it was the Commodore Amiga, you had the Commodore Amiga and an Atari ST. They were the two main ones.
Okay.
Um, Back on the 8-bit ones, so like the Commodore 64, yeah, you had Commodore Spectrum, and yeah, Amstrad got in the market for a little bit, but they didn't last too long. Um, but then kind of when console gaming came in, I think that was really it. So even the Amiga went out, didn't last too much longer past, when it died out, there wasn't the successor to that. It was PCs then, or consoles. See, there was other stuff going on. There were other weird devices. Obviously, even before me, you had the Atari. Do you know the Atari 2600? Yeah,
Yeah.
you had that. Um, and if you've got a chance to go to like one of these gaming arcade things, or like one I went to was Heart of Gaming in London, you can see a whole variety of different consoles, man. There's like the Nintendo, I think it's Virtual Boy, where you put your face in it, and it is like all red graphics, but it's supposed to be kind of like 3D. It's really bizarre. My first console was actually the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, and I got it. Well, I say fairly late on, but it was about 95, 96, I think, and I got it quite cheap. But this was actually, now your dad. Your dad's not overly a gamer, was he? But this got your dad into gaming. Yeah, because we had I bought the original Medal of Honor on that, and that was a great game at the time. So now Call of Duty is where it's at, but Medal of Honor was actually a massive game at the time, and he played that. Again, standout for me on that was, I had a game called Driver. Now you remember Driver, don't you? You played it on
Yeah,
the PS2.
driver. Yeah.
And what am I going to say about the first Driver?
Oh,
What
the very
was
last mission. The
no?
protect. Is it?
No. Well, it's the
Oh,
last
the
one.
very first mission, actually. Yeah, yeah.
It
You needed to basically unlock the secrets of the universe just to play the fucking game.
was the tutorial where you had to do, I think, 8 or 9 skills in a
Yeah,
minute. Do you
yeah,
remember in the
yeah,
car
yeah. And
park?
then there was that timer ticking down. It'd be like a checklist in the corner. I remember. You know what? It was funny because I actually downloaded the driver. I think I don't know if there was a version on my phone or something that I played recently, and I went online to have a look, and it was something stupid like 30% of people never actually played the game because they didn't complete the first level, which allowed you to play the game.
It is insane. It is insane, and I've never known a game since to do it like that. But yeah, if you couldn't pass the tutorial, you couldn't play the game. That was, I remember at the time there was a lot of hype around that because it had like a filmmaker mode. But it was a great game. And I think yeah, the last level was also difficult. And I think the only reason I completed it was because the game didn't glitch. But like I said, this is where I might be confusing it with Driver 2, but the final mission of one of them, you've either got to escort the president,
Yeah, it's the
yeah,
president's
yeah,
run. Yeah,
and you've
yeah,
got people in like limos chasing you, I think, or something, and they would always catch me. But at one point, I don't know what I did, but I must have confused the AI, and I saw these two cars that were chasing me come by me on their roofs. So they flew down, which meant they couldn't chase me anymore.
No, yeah, I remember the original drivers were actually class, but they were quite cool as well because it was kind of a new concept. I don't know if it was then Driver 2 because I think were there two driver games on the PlayStation 1.
Yeah, I think yeah. There was definitely a third one, but I think that might
I
have been
think the third one would have been the
yeah,
PlayStation 2 because yeah, I think the first two drivers and then I think the third one was like about getting out of cars and that sort of thing. But they were absolutely banging driving games. I still believe that they set the precedent for what was ultimately to become your likes of your Grand Theft Autos and that sort of
GTA.
thing. Because
Yeah,
ultimately it was a free roam, and the graphics obviously, I mean, by your standards, the graphics at that time would have been amazing,
they
but
were,
by
man.
my standards, they were
Yeah.
crap, obviously. But to be fair, for the world that they rendered and that sort of thing at the time, it's actually pretty impressive. I think one of them came on two CDs though, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, not 11 floppies though, is
Yeah, yeah, not 11
it?
floppy disks though, so
But yeah, you did have at the time, even on the Xbox 360, I remember you did have multi-disc games. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Some of them genuinely just couldn't hold it.
yeah,
But yeah, yeah, those original driver games are brilliant. I think in reality, the first experience that I properly had with gaming was probably a PlayStation One. And I don't know if it was your PlayStation One or if we had one at my house anyway.
no, I think it might have been mine. I remember because you were quite young at the time. So like I said, if I got it around 95, 96, and then I had it for years, you would have only been literally a toddler, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I
And
would have
I
been
remember
maybe
you
5 or
always wanted
6.
to play it. You saw me playing it and you wanted to play it right. And this is where at the start, I was obviously the mean uncle. What I did was I had a second controller, which I gave to you, but I didn't plug it in. So, yeah, here we go. This is where our relationship's tested now. Um, I would give you a controller and you'd think you were playing it. But after a while, you did suss out that I don't know if it's because you saw me still playing it or what, but you worked out it wasn't real. So you would just try grab the controller. One game stand out before we get to kind of like PlayStation 2, which is probably and I'd say modern consoles where we can just jump in together now is the Metal Gear Solid game that was on it, right? You came up against, and this is what I want to talk about, games that did things differently. There was a an enemy called Psycho Mantis who said he could read your mind.
Ah, I've heard this.
Yeah. And what he would do is if you had on your memory card other Konami games made by them, he would say, "Oh, I see you like playing Castlevania and you've had to save it 20 times." He would say that. And then he would say, "Put your controller on the desk and I'll move it." And then the rumble pads would go into overdrive and move, you know. And then the battle again, and this is where I probably did have to use it online. You couldn't beat him, but what you had to do, because he could read your mind, you had to unplug the controller and put it into the other port so he couldn't read your mind. I mean, brilliant, but absolutely frustrating at the time. But stand out now.
See, that's even a cool concept now. I would still be impressed now if a game developer managed to fit something like that into their game. Like, how cool would that concept be? It's like disconnect your controller and use player two.
Yeah. It just didn't make sense at the time, but then it did in the game. It did, but yeah, how did I work out you had to do that? I don't know, but then you got PlayStation 2, which I also had, and it was, for me, the standout on that was you had games like Grand Theft Auto 3, which turned it open world, and that was amazing. Silent Hill. Oh, and because this was the system I then gave it to you because after a while it
Yeah,
was starting to hurt my wrist. I think the controller was just too small for me or something. Oh, I
yeah,
didn't get on
yeah.
with the controller, so I kind of gave it to you. And we had like the wrestling games on it. Do you remember? Was it
Oh,
SmackDown?
the wrestling games were brilliant. SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain, Just Bring It. I think the original SmackDown versus Raws were on there as well. Yeah, the SmackDown games, the WWE games were brilliant at the time. But yeah, I think the PlayStation 2 was when I first properly started getting into gaming. Because I may or may not have also had your copy of Grand Theft Auto Vice City.
You would have
Um,
actually, yeah, you would have done, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and that was a class game. I never think I played GTA 3 originally. I think Vice City would have been my first Grand Theft Auto game. But yeah, that. And then, like you said, it's true. The Medal of Honors even ran onto the PS2
Yeah.
ultimately as being better games. And I always remember playing Medal of Honor and preferring it and never understanding why Call of Duty kind of took over. Because to me, the Medal of Honor stories were always better, the gameplay was better. But Call of Duty, I think, just captured the kind of casuals market a bit better, I think, maybe.
Well, because I remember then that was it. You then continued to get like you had the PlayStation 3, then didn't you? I can't remember when it came out. No, it would have been 3. Was Modern Warfare on the PlayStation
Yeah,
3?
Modern Warfare was the PlayStation 3, yeah.
Because I remember you got that and coming around your house because I stopped. I didn't have a console then for a while, and I remember looking at Modern Warfare and thinking, "Wow, this is a
Yeah,
game."
yeah,
Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? That's just stunning at the time. But yeah, so in terms of you, then this is where kind of like you come in.
Well, you know what? I'm going to start off with handhelds at first.
Yeah,
Because that's probably my earliest, and I will always maintain this. I will maintain it probably until the day that I die, because I don't think I'll ever get a better present. I remember getting a Game Boy Advance, and that was by far the best present. I still, to this day, I've never been more excited to open something. And I always remember playing like side scroller Mario games on it. And it was just a brilliant thing. Like you had the little cartridges that you had to blow into to make sure the dust didn't come out because you'd like paused it and it like the game was freezing at levels. But even playing like stuff like Tetris on a handheld was amazing.
yeah.
And then I think that probably, I don't know when that released, but that probably would have come just after I'd initially had like PlayStation 2, because I think the PlayStation 2 was about year 2000, wasn't it? Thereabouts.
Yeah, because the original Game Boy, which I did have and was amazing, was I think was that early 90s or mid 90s?
Yeah, I think that was mid 90s. And then I can't remember if the Game Boy Color came up. I think the Game Boy Color came after
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then the Game Boy Advance was one after that as well. Yeah, 2001 when the Game Boy Advance
I
came out.
forgot you had that. Yeah.
Yeah, oh my god, I've never been. I remember exactly where I was when I was given it. I swear to God, best thing I ever had. I think I've still got it in the loft somewhere. I'm gonna have to pull it out. But yeah, I think I remember stuff like you just had like Tetris, or you had some Super Mario,
Yeah, yeah,
like the
yeah.
side scroller stuff on the Game Boys, and then from there it would have been the PS2, and I think that was probably like my real like in on gaming. Do you remember Star Wars Battlefront?
Yes, oh, the original. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the original Battlefronts, they were brilliant. Again, the Medal of Honors and the Call of Duty started to come out in that generation. I think Call of Duty 3 Big Red One was on the
Yeah, yeah, that's
PS2.
it, the big red
That was
one.
what- that was the
Yeah.
I think that was the one that changed everything in reality. I know that Modern Warfare was brilliant, but I think the Big Red One was the switch from Medal of Honor to Call of Duty. But yeah, I think the PS2 was the best one for me. I remember playing Crash Bandicoot as well.
Crash
And those were
Bandicoot.
PS1 games that kind of then ported over to the PS2. And the thing is, as well, I had a lot of experience with the PS1 games because the PS2 could play pretty much all of them.
That's
I'm
right,
pretty sure
yeah.
because it was backwards compatible at the time, wasn't it? So yeah, the original drivers I think were absolutely class. But yeah, Grand Theft Auto was brilliant. I always remember San Andreas as well.
Oh, CJ.
Yeah, CJ, that's the one. I know that it's. I think we've discussed this before, and this is probably for people listening going to be an unpopular opinion because I also agree with you, and that's that Vice City was the best GTA.
Oh no, you've done it now. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, I see, and it's interesting because they're going to come out, aren't they? Again, they're being remastered.
yeah,
Um,
they have, yeah,
and I'd love to see it, but I remember because I love Scarface, etc. I really like San Andreas, but for me, Vice City was it. Yeah,
yeah. Vice City was brilliant because it's true. I think you discussed the music, the whole kind of Scarfacey like theme
yeah.
around it. Yeah, it was a brilliant
It was a
game.
game of excess, wasn't it? Like the
Yeah.
neon, it was totally the cliched, yeah.
Yeah, that was brilliant. And you know what? I don't think this is something that you owned, but I don't know if this came. I think this probably came just before my PlayStation 3, if I remember rightly. We had a Wii.
I know I didn't, but I know you did. Yeah, and I was
Yeah.
amazed at the time. Yeah.
And yeah, it's true. Like the technology advancement was like, oh my god, this is the best thing because it's like motion technology. Like I can play Mario Kart, and if I turn the controller, he turns. It was like you'd get your family around, and if they were ever around, like for an event or whatever, you'd put the Wii on, and everyone would be fascinated that you could play fucking 10-pin bowling,
It was bowling, tennis, and what was the other
bowling,
one?
baseball,
Tennis. Did I say
baseball
tennis?
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
tennis, baseball was brilliant as well. And then they brought out like that Wii board thing
Yeah.
that you could like surf on or ski on or something like
Do you
that.
remember though? Actually, going back a bit, do you remember was it the PlayStation Eye, the Eye toy? Do you remember that?
Oh god, yeah, yeah, the
Yeah,
PlayStation Eye toy, god, because that would had the games where you used
it
to
was
like
awful.
spin plates or like wash windows, and you just cheat by getting a pillow, and you
Yeah,
just wash the whole window in 2
it
seconds.
was awful. Yeah, it was like the window full of soap suds or something, and you had to rub it away. Yeah, no, you just had to put your hand right in front of the camera. I mean, it was awful. It was awful.
The spinning plates one as well. Do you know, that was brilliant. But you know what? The games on that one were weird because it was basically just like a mix of kind of action and chores.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
wash a window. I'm like, well, yeah, wouldn't fucking do it in real life, but I love
that was
doing it in the game. Yeah, God, the eye toy. And you know what? To be fair, even still at the time, I know that it was pretty basic for what it was, but the technology was brilliant,
yeah,
really,
yeah. I
because
mean,
it
for
was a
the
bit of
time,
a
yeah,
yeah, it was a gimmick, wasn't it?
yeah.
Really, but it was a pretty well executed one, to be fair.
Probably
Because
just as
yeah,
good as the Connect.
yeah, that's true. Actually, you probably wouldn't tell the difference.
Actually, Microsoft is still not following me, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. But they're following me, so maybe I can drag a sponsorship in.
Yeah, you said you were going to sort that out.
But yeah, the Wii was brilliant. Again, moving back through to handhelds, the DS was another thing that I had,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I never
and
had
that was
that.
obviously brilliant as well. You had stuff like Animal Crossing, Nintendogs, if you ever
Oh
remember.
god, that was massive, wasn't it? That was
Yeah,
massive.
Nintendogs was huge.
Basically,
That
a
was like,
glorified Tamagotchi.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. Like you can still log onto it 2 years later, and you're just like, oh no, your dogs are fine. They're just a bit dirty. I'm like, all right. Yeah, but that as well, I think, was a cool one. The Wii, sorry, the DS, because as well, I remember going on like school trips, and everyone would have a DS, and you could connect over like their local like network. So as long as the DS was like within range, you could basically play like Mario Kart with people that had a DS near you, and not all of you even had to have the game. So
Yeah,
only
yeah.
one of you needed to have the
Right,
game,
right.
and
Yeah,
you could
yeah.
like port into their version and all
Okay.
race together. And I thought that was a really cool feature.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember the DS being huge. I mean, it was up until a couple of years ago until they tried to make it 3D and no one
It's
cared anymore.
3DS, yeah.
Yeah,
But the thing I like about it again, it was trying to do something different. The second screen could be used for was it like inventory stuff or a map or something, while the
yeah,
other
yeah,
screen,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, and that's brilliant. You know, it's a clever and a useful way of introducing something different to tech, right?
You know what? I probably shouldn't admit this, so I don't know if this is gonna. Well, we're gonna have to leave it in now. But I still play a Nintendo DS every day, and
Do
that's
you?
because there is one in my bathroom in the cupboard next to the toilet. And you know, if you're ever having a little bit of a longer time in there, you pull the DS out, pass a bit of time. That's what you do. So if I'm ever gone for 45 minutes, just know that I'm breaking records.
Breaking records. Oh dear.
But yeah, and then you know what? Again, before moving to the next gen, and again, I still can't remember if this came before the PlayStation 3 or not, but the PSP as well.
Yes,
The
yes.
PSP was brilliant because that was, I think, the first time where you felt you were getting proper console games, but on a portable device.
Yeah, I had one as well, and that was a really good handheld, wasn't it?
Yeah, it
The
was brilliant.
graphics were comparable, wasn't it? To
Yeah, yeah, it was. It was really well done. Like even the discs were proper discs. They were in those little like plastic cartridges, weren't they?
well, there was the small
Um,
mini ones, though, weren't they? They were like they were almost like a little compact disc or something. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, they were. They
Yeah,
were
the
basically just a
UMDs or something.
CD.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
yeah, yeah,
UMDs.
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Released in 2004. So it came out really again quite early. But I still remember like I had full fledged FIFA games on
Yes,
the
that's right.
on the
And hold on,
PSP.
didn't that have like the skill games where you turn it long ways so you could do keepy ups or something?
Yeah,
Wasn't
yeah,
that?
that was
That's
the
it. Yeah,
one. Yeah, they'd
yeah,
get you to turn it the other way. The controls would
yeah,
change based on what like mini game you were
yeah,
playing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I had the PSP, and that was really good. You know, especially I think you'd got Was it Wipeout? I think like Wipeout was on that, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that really showcased. But that was like you said, it was a console. It was a portable console. I think that was the first time we had anything like that.
Yeah, and I remember having so much fun on that. I don't remember, I think they were expensive at the time as well. I remember them being like 350 quid or something at the time. But they were expensive. But I remember as well the games were kind of half comparable to full like console release games as well. But you kind of didn't mind because they were decent games. It was again, like I said, console gaming. But again, PSP introduced your first like PSN network gaming as well, because they had the ability where you would have like your PSN account. Because I think online gaming was kind of a little bit of a thing with the PS2, but I think only particular games supported it. And then the PSP, I think, if I remember rightly, gave you the ability to probably have like a PSN network address and that sort of thing. So you could actually play with friends in your friends list, if I remember rightly.
I think also then Xbox. I think the original Xbox brought on online gaming to the majority of people, but I never had the original Xbox. Yeah, no, I remember. Yeah, the PSP you could do on like you said, online gaming, and for that as well, that was something pretty special as well to be able to do that on a handheld
Yeah,
console,
yeah, it was pretty impressive because
and it
then I
was a
think
sexy bit of kit as well.
yeah, it was. It was a brilliantly
Yeah,
designed thing as
yeah,
well, to be
yeah.
fair, because the screen size was great. Like, and in reality, if we think back to it, the PSP probably should have tried to kill off the DS because it was actually just a better gaming system.
Well, it also you could buy movies for it, couldn't you?
Yeah, yeah, you could
Yeah,
have everything. Yeah, you could have movies on it because yeah, like I said, that was the first time where like your PSN store was accessible as well.
yeah,
I remember getting like an updated one a few days later, which was it was a few days later, a few years later.
yeah.
That was the slidey one. It's like a slide mobile phone. I can't remember what it was called. If it was like the PSP Lite or Slim or whatever it was.
Oh, I don't know about that.
And
Yeah.
that one was like fully downloadable, as in there were no
Oh, the
cartridges.
Vita, was that the Vita?
Yeah,
I
the
was thinking.
Vita,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And you just had the games actually downloaded onto the console itself. And
I think
again,
that was
that
a
was your
problem though.
diskless.
I think
Yeah,
I think that
yeah,
was
it probably
too
hint.
ahead of its
It was
time,
yeah.
probably. Yeah.
That's the thing, which is a shame because it was just too early. But when you think about the practicality, no scratch discs, no messing about with ports, everything was on there on the go. You didn't need to carry cartridges with you because it was a portable games console to begin with. It was actually a brilliant thing, and it's kind of a shame that Sony probably won't attempt anything like that ever again.
Well, like you said, I mean, I think people just didn't like it at the time because you couldn't own the game. But even sorry, you didn't own a physical game. Sorry, and like even when the Xbox One was marketed, they were trying to go for a digital all online, and people were criticizing that. But I look at my catalog now. Okay, time and all that plays a factor, but my catalog is far more digital now
Yeah,
because you
yeah.
get a cheap bargain. When like Xbox do their sale or something, and you pick it up, and I like, yeah, I just haven't got space to have like 10, 20, game cases now under my TV or whatever. So, ironically, we all slated them back then, but digital seems starting to be the way to go now.
Yeah, that's the thing. Even me, like, I can't remember when the last time I bought like a physical disc was. In reality, I just don't really do it anymore. And thinking about, like I said, that PSP, I think that if PlayStation announced another portable console tomorrow that was download only, I think I'd pick it up.
Then you had so you had the PlayStation 2, which I got rid of because it was injuring me, and then you got the PS3, didn't you?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then you
I had a
got the
PlayStation 3. Yeah,
360. Didn't you get
me
the 360?
personally, no, I never
Oh
had
no
a
no. Oh
360.
okay.
And you know what the thing was as well is like the 360 is probably the console that most people my age would say like got them into gaming
Yeah.
properly. But I was always PlayStation up until that point. And so I had a PlayStation 3, never touched a 360, and my first dabble into Xbox was with the one.
And then you had the original. You had the day one release, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah, I had a day one
I
release
remember
of
you
the
telling me when
Xbox.
you got that because you got like one of the mega deals from Game, I think. And I came round because I hadn't got it yet because I had the Xbox 360, and the reason I got back into that was because I worked with a guy who had a 360, and I'd go to his house and we'd play like Call of Duty and Rainbow Six Vegas, and I found a controller because it was bigger and the joysticks were slightly off center, unlike the PlayStation, which has them. The joysticks are lined up, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah,
I found that okay, so I bought a 360 mainly because again I got it so late. They had three games I really wanted and always wanted to play, and probably some of my favourites now, which was Mass Effect,
yeah,
Bioshock, and GTA 4, which I still love now, all three of those, to varying degrees. But Mass Effect is just bloody awesome. But yeah, then I went to the Xbox One, but much later. And I remember, yeah, when you got the Xbox One, I was straight around your house that night to see.
I remember because that was the first console that I'd like bought myself that wasn't a present. And I think I stayed with PlayStation. I had PlayStation 3s. And then do you know what it was? I think my original fat PS3 had broke and that had like had some issue with like circuit board. So then I had a slim one, but that one also packed up. So then when it came to the next generation, I was just like, well, I've had two PlayStations this generation that haven't lasted. So I switched to the Xbox One, and because I originally had a pre-order for a PS4, which I think came out 2 days before or 2 days after the Xbox did, but instead I went to games, switched it for an Xbox One bundle, and I remember this is horrific to say, but I think it'd been my 18th birthday, like the month before, so I had birthday money. I think I ended up spending like 750 quid
Yeah, I
that
wasn't
day.
going to say
Like,
anything.
it was bad.
Yeah.
I remember I walked in for my console and then I bought I think 6 games, an extra controller, some Xbox Live, which is like £50 in and of itself.
Did have a couple of HD movies.
Yeah, like they bundled it in with films as well. I was just like,
Yeah.
I don't want this bullshit. Just let me
Yeah, but what's
unbox.
birthday money for if not to treat yourself, right?
And you know what? We recently talked about it because it's very unfortunate. But I've had that day one edition Xbox until maybe what 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. Oh man,
Because it's only just recently packed up. I still had the
I did
original
shed a
day one
tear.
certificate. I
I
thought, you know
know.
what, fallen soldier, but it's been with me for 7, 8 years.
But I remember at the time as well feeling quite bad because I'm not either or. So I've had the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, PSP, PlayStation 2, and I have briefly owned a PlayStation 4. I just went to Xbox, like I said, because the 360 I found a controller better. Naturally went to the Xbox One, and now I've got just a massive back catalogue of digital stuff. So I've continued on to the Series X.
Yeah.
But I love PlayStation as well because I remember at the time saying to you, I've really wanted to play Heavy Rain, and there was another game at the
Heavy
time, but
Rain. Oh, Heavy Rain. You know what? Heavy Rain was a game that was an absolute masterpiece. It was genuinely because that was almost what was like a feature length film,
yeah,
or it was
yeah.
actually a game, but like a feature length film
Well,
that you controlled.
except for the one bit, wasn't it? Where you have to press X. Jason,
Yeah, yeah.
Jason, 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 Jason.
Oh my god. Oh my god, that game was brilliant. But yeah, I remember just walking around aimlessly, not completing the mission, just making the dad scream his son's name.
The guy or the company that make them, he's got such a great vision, but sometimes the games not always match it. So he had a game on the it was on the Xbox and it may have been on one of the PlayStations, but it was called over here it was called Fahrenheit. I think in America it was called Indigo Prophecy. And again, it was another one where it was very much gesture driven. So if you had to open a drawer, you had to move the cursor or the mouse in a certain way. And then there was like a Simon Says bit battle would be you'd have to match like a quick time event, where it flashed certain symbols.
Yeah,
And it was a great sort of story where it starts off where you get sort of possessed and kill someone and it's just brilliant how they did it. So it's like, did you stay to try dispose of the evidence or cover up as much of the evidence, but at which point like the police would come and potentially catch you? Or did you make a runner or do a runner, but you may leave some evidence? But then it turns out you then also then play the police. So you were playing two or three characters. You were playing the suspect and the police trying to catch you.
yeah.
It's kind of like Heavy Rain in a way, wasn't it? There wasn't
Yeah, because I
without
again,
spoiler, but I think we're past spoiler territory
yeah,
now, aren't
yeah. I
we?
mean, 2010 or whenever it was released, I would hope that at this point, if you hadn't heard about Heavy Rain, don't worry about it. It's too late to go back now. But you know what? Again, that's probably a game that, in terms of storyline, still really holds up nowadays because
Yeah,
the story was brilliant, and it was one of the first games that I remember that had a storyline that would change depending on what selections you'd
yeah,
made in the game. So I remember that you would play it, and then what you would do is you would go round the story again just to get the alternate endings.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that was again, it was good replayability factor as well for me because it was something. It was a bit like Mass Effect games did that as well, didn't
yeah, yeah,
they?
yeah.
You had multiple endings with them.
Yeah, they
Well,
did, but I think though, yeah, Heavy Rain I think was better at
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Although I do love Mass Effect. Yeah, he did another one. It was I think Beyond Two Souls, which I played. Basically, when I got my PlayStation 4, I got it. It was mainly to play the Uncharted games because I really wanted to play the Uncharted
yeah.
games. And yeah, it was Heavy Rain. It was Beyond Two Souls, which again I don't remember too much about it. And then they did another one, I think I think it was for the PlayStation 4. Was it Detroit Become Human? I never played
Oh,
it,
I don't
but
know.
I'd love to play that. But they are exclusive to PlayStation, so this is where again, yeah, you feel like you do have to have both if you want to experience the best of gaming.
Yeah, because you know what, as well, do you know what I always missed out on with exclusives and what I always regret? I missed out on the 360 Halo generation.
Yeah, all right, yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I remember playing Halo like when I was at my mate's house, and the online community for it was brilliant. And all of my mates used to play it, but because I was one of the only odd ones out with a PlayStation, I was sat there being like, "Oh, does anybody want to play Gran Turismo?"
but stick with here you go Xbox. Hear me. I'm trying to sell you another console for you. So follow me. Stick with Series Xbox, and then you download the Master Chief Collection on Game Pass, and you get every Halo game included. Every Halo game, including Infinite, coming out in December. But that's it. Like the game like Heavy Rain, I know it's got its critics, but again, at least it felt like it was trying to do something different, trying to tell
Yeah,
a
yeah,
story, trying to
yeah.
put that element. It was a bit clunky.
There was another game, I think it was on PlayStation 4, if I remember rightly. I don't know if you ever played it. Was it called Until Dawn?
Yes, yes, the horror game.
That's the one, because that was kind of a similar style in terms of the way it played. It was very much, as opposed to playing a game, you're kind of just deciding a storyline.
Yeah,
And I don't think I ever played that because if I remember rightly, I think it was an exclusive to PlayStation and this
yeah,
generation or last generation. I had an Xbox, but I remember watching an entire playthrough of the entire game because I thought it was that brilliant. And
yeah.
again, that style is actually quite cool. I remember that being something that I always wanted to play, but just never did because I couldn't go out and buy another console.
It was really weird because the graphics were quite disconcerting because they were almost. They had a couple of famous actors in it, didn't it? So I think Remy Malik, I
Remy Malek,
think,
yeah,
yeah.
he was one of the characters. That's right, yeah.
And oh my god, I've forgotten her name now. That she was the cheerleader in Heroes. Oh, I can't remember her name, but she was in it. But they really looked like them, and it was really off-putting because they looked like who they were, and sometimes the eyes just looked too real. But yeah, it was a funny, not funny. It was funny in how it was messed up depending on which options you did. So, and again, that was another one where apparently I finished it and then was distraught when I read I think you can keep the majority of the characters alive, but I ended up killing most of them off, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, because that's the thing. I remember even with Heavy Rain, like I went through the thing and literally got the shittest, most unjustified ending
Yeah.
possible, and then went on all of like the online forums on IGN and realized I literally made the worst decisions I could have made.
I feel so bad in game. I have to replay games and I have to get the good ending. I feel bad if I get the bad. My conscience. I know it's terrible. It's like it's like Mass Effect. I've played it about 5 or 6 times, and every time I say right, I'm going to play the Renegade, which is like the bad option. Never do. I still do the same options. I'm always the good guy.
Yeah, Mass Effect. You know what? Mass Effect was another series that I think only you got me into,
Yeah,
and I
it was.
think it's because you bought me like a collection of them at some point for like a birthday or a Christmas or
Yeah,
something. Because I'd never ever played Mass Effect before, and then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, I'm going to complete this game. I'm going to do all of the ending.
I remember feeling like the best uncle in the world because I think, yeah, when you got your PlayStation, and I think when Mass Effect 2, I think, came out, so Mass Effect 1 was exclusive to Xbox, but then 2, I think, was multi platform. But I think with 2, they included like a storybook that you could play to get
Yeah,
the option one.
yeah.
And I think I bought you that. And I think I also bought you Fallout New Vegas, didn't I?
Yeah, New Vegas. Wow, the
Yeah.
Fallout games. You haven't even
Yeah.
touched on Fallout. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and they were. I mean, I loved the RPGs. Did you then play Fallout? Did you play Fallout 3 or Fallout 4 as well? I can't
I think
remember.
I played Fallout 4. Was new so it went Fallout 3, then New Vegas, then Fallout 4, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, I think New Vegas was the first one that I played. And probably
yeah.
the best one still to this date that I've played, to be honest.
Yeah. I've actually re-downloaded it. I need to play it, but yeah. So it's just bizarre, isn't it? That sort of game. So I know at the moment you're kind of like you said, you're consoleless because your one died. What
well,
are you gonna
well,
do?
no, I'm not.
Oh,
Because
oh,
whilst my Xbox One died, I kind of said to myself, well, you know what? Really, the only things that I was kind of playing was a bit of Call of Duty, and a bit of FIFA because I'm old and an adult and have responsibilities and
What
shouldn't
am I?
game for 8 hours.
Oh my word, you're putting me to shame here.
8 hours a day now. So what I actually did do is, because my Xbox died, and I did this a couple of months ago, not knowing that my Xbox was on the way out anyway, I went back and bought a boxed PlayStation 2.
Oh, of course you did. Yeah, I
Yeah,
completely forgot.
and
Yeah,
I went
yeah.
and I was buying games for like 50p each. So I think I've got like now a PlayStation 2. I've got one of those you'll remember this because everybody had one when they were collecting games. One of those like do you know disc holders? It was like a folder and you slid your discs into
Yes,
it. It was like
yes,
back to
yes,
back. So it was like a book that
yes,
you used to flip through
yes.
the games. And I think I've got probably about 80 PlayStation 2 games now.
Oh man, I
Like the
forgot you got that. Yeah.
GTAs, I've got some of the Call of Duties and Medal of Honors, some Spyro.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Some
Spyro the
back in the
Dragon. Yeah,
day,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, do
Crash
you
Team
remember the
Racing. Oh, that was great.
Crash Team Racing?
Yeah.
Do you remember the Getaway? It was based in London, but they
Yes.
proper
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
recreated London even at the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, them. I've got again, as I mentioned before, the WWE games. The one with Brock Lesnar on the front. Here comes the pain. By far the best one. But yeah, so that's probably going to tie me over until I can maybe think to myself, am I going to commit to a new console because they're
Uh,
out of stock still everywhere.
yeah, and I'm gonna say it. I think the PlayStation 2 again is probably the best looking console
Yeah,
that's
it
been.
was
I'm
brilliant.
gonna
The
say
original
that.
one as well
Yeah,
was fantastic looking.
yeah.
Whereas all of a sudden, because the slim one was one that didn't even have a disc tray, like you had to physically lift it up, and that was that
Oh
was actually
really?
really razor thin. That one was, to
Yeah,
be fair. And the PlayStation 3 came out, and do you remember it was just that humongous, like
that was
metallic
huge.
black box?
That was the shiny, wasn't it? No, wasn't it kind of shiny, plasticky
Yeah,
looking?
yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's the one.
yeah.
And then after that, obviously, consoles just got horrifically bigger and bigger to the point where like you can't even fit a PS5 in a
Well,
in
that's
a
it. Well, you got the Series X, which they mocked to be a fridge, and then to be fair to Xbox, they've now released a mini fridge.
Yeah, they have. Yeah,
So that's fair play. That's brilliant. And then was it the PlayStation 5 was a Virgin Media router in a folder?
yeah, a
Yeah,
Virgin Media router in a folder if it had decided to take steroids. It's like,
yeah, yeah. That's it. You go back that for me, the PlayStation 2 is, but even like the original PlayStation for me is classic. That is a small, compact, and that circular disc you pushed lid that you push down. But yeah, so yeah, a couple of things I missed out. So yeah, you said it. I had the original Game Boy, which I thought was just amazing. You couldn't play it in like direct sunlight, but I also had so you know that like the Game and Watch games. You heard of those? They were like, I think they were like Nintendo. They were like little handhelds, but a single game, really limited graphics. But they were the Game and Watch were really simple. Have a look, you'll find because for those listening, I've edited out the last 10 minutes because I'm struggling to explain what a Game and Watch is to Lou. But yeah, they were these handheld games, really simple. But then I had a couple of weird ones, and I had to look them up because one I can't find online, but I absolutely had it, and it was a handheld game, and you'd open it up and the game was actually on the top screen, but you were looking at a mirror. It was being reflected into the mirror to see it the right way around.
right, okay, okay, I understand. Like a periscopy type looking, like do you know, with the angles on a periscope, if that
Kind of,
makes
yeah.
sense.
So imagine you've got like a rectangle, right? You open up the top part. Light, you'd need sunlight to shine in the top to light up the graphics, but you're actually looking at it in the mirror, which I don't know why they do it. It's a really convoluted way of playing the game, but maybe it was because they wanted the light to shine onto it, and that was great. But I can't find it online. If anyone's listening and knows it, please let me know. Then I had another one called, it was Donkey Kong 3, but it was called the Micro Versus system. Now it had two little controllers on long leads. Each person would have one, and you're on either side of the screen, and there was like a mosquito in the middle, and you had to try blow the mosquito over to the other person's side to sting them. But again, it was a really basic game. So if you look up, I think if people are interested, I think it's called Donkey Kong 3 Micro Versus system. But one of my favorite ones was, it was called Tomitronic 3D, right? And it was this big chunky triangular device that had two eyepieces. So you'd put them to your eyes, and it would be like a 3D game in front of you. Now the one I had was called Shark Attack, and I'll send you the pictures at some point. But it was a really simple game where sharks would start at the bottom of the screen, come up, and you were a diver, and you had to try shoot the sharks. And there was one, yeah, there was one with tanks, and there was a car one where you were driving along, and you had to avoid the other cars. But it gave you E08, but yeah, imagine holding this device to your eyes and you're playing a 3D device. Well, what looked like a 3D device, at the time. And as a kid, that kind of blew my mind again because it was just amazing. So yeah, definitely look out the Tomitronic 3D. I guess I want to say that I've always loved gaming and I still do. And I know, like I said, between us, we've kind of gone through almost everything, haven't we? And
You know what? I think at one point I probably did have a gaming addiction. I think I said this before, but when I played Call of Duty 5 World at War, that was my favourite Call of Duty because
yeah,
it was like gory as well. And I remember, I think my total game time over the course of the year was 65 days on that
wow.
game. And when I think about it, I'm like, well, so that technically means that I spent four hours a day at the minimum on that game every day
Wow,
for an
yeah.
entire year. And I think to myself, you know what, maybe I've loosened up a little bit now because, I've got other things that I need to do. But do you know what it is as well? I find nowadays there used to be games that I was really excited for release. So I remember Heavy Rain had a load of hype about it. I wanted to go out, I wanted to buy it. And I don't remember as well if you ever remember on PlayStation 3, it was a game called Mag,
Yes, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it was like game changing. It was like 250 players or
That's
500
right.
players
Yeah,
all in one game together, all online, all on the same map. And I remember the hype around that was brilliant. Needed to go and get it. And I think the thing is with me now is like, okay, my Xbox is broken. I just struggle to see where the pull is for games now, because even the stuff that you play traditionally that are super mainstream, like your Call of Duties, like your FIFAs, to me, I am just seeing like the repackaged game from the year before,
yeah,
but
yeah,
just a bit shinier. And
yeah.
I'm just not as invested as I probably would have been if I'd have seen really well hyped original games again.
Yeah, and I think actually that's really really good point, and I wanted to say that. So I think age and growing up does play a bit of a part potentially in it, but I think you're right in that. I said to you, imagine going from if you lived through it like the going from a Commodore 64 to the Commodore Amiga. That was a jump. That was wow. This is where's technology going to go? But like
Yeah,
you said, now it feels like we're just getting revisions, and there's no. You get slightly shinier graphics,
yeah,
and the console does a little bit more in
yeah,
terms of
yeah,
now you can stream, from it, but there's no real jump anymore. And even like I said, the games now you lose it. Like I said, on the Commodore 64, the Amiga, anyone could code a game for it, and you had hundreds of different types of games. Now you get your premium games, and they're generally the same games every other year. I mean, the Assassin's Creed they were releasing every year. Now I'm glad they've kind of taken a break and are doing it every other year. I think
yeah,
now every
yeah,
couple of years. Far Cry's, I love the Far Cry's, but I got Far Cried out. I think because I was just playing it so much. FIFA every year there's slight changes, and then they announce it with like some fancy buzzwords. It's got like new, I don't know, player emotion engine, and see them sweat kind of thing. But for me, who isn't necessarily massively into football, sorry, football games, I should say. It's like you said. I'm still happy playing kind of like FIFA 18 or FIFA
yeah, yeah.
15 on
Yeah,
Game
it's
Pass.
true. It's true. Because in reality, the games actually haven't come that far. And you know what? Even with the systems as well, we just talked like the systems aren't now for gaming. Like, I remember when the Xbox One came out, Xbox marketed it as being like the center of your living room because it was supposed to link to all of your other devices
Yeah,
and it was like the center hub for everything. It's like, no, we want a games console to fucking game, so
yeah,
focus
yeah,
on the
yeah,
games.
yeah,
Don't
yeah.
stop. You've got really good exclusive titles and game series. I just think to myself, I don't care that I can watch Netflix on it because my telly does that anyway nowadays. I don't care that you're giving me a web browser because I've got a laptop for that and a phone for that. And that's the thing. I feel like the need for actual they've dropped the kind of the priority for it to be an actual gaming console and now made it some like multimedia like device that you just don't need anyway.
I think now they come back full circle. So I think Microsoft have done wonders now with the SX, and I think towards the end of the Xbox One with Game Pass and everything, I think they're doing the right things again, and they've got a lot of studios now. Whether it's age and time, because there was a time where I could play till basically like 1:30 in the morning and still get up fine. This was
Yeah.
years ago, and not worry about the fact I'm only getting like sort of 6 hours sleep, which I couldn't even dream of doing that now. Yeah, it's kind of the things I like. I like my big adventure games, but like I said to you, the things I've pointed out, I like games that try to do a little bit something different, something innovative. So like that Metal Gear Solid game where that character read your memory card
Yeah.
and you had to unplug the controller. As frustrating as it was, I look back at it and think that was a brilliant thing. When GTA went from, because I don't know if you remember, but GTA originally was 2D top down game.
Yeah, yeah, I remember, yeah.
So when I played 3, again, mind blown, literally. And there was a game recently. I think it would have been on Xbox One, and I get mixed up with PlayStation 3 or 4, but it was the Lord of the Rings games. Is it Mordor, Battle for Mordor, or something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
They introduced a nemesis system where if a character beat you, it would rise in ranks in its like area or its gang or whatever, you know. So if one of the orcs beat you, it would start becoming more powerful and gain more respect. Do you know what I mean? So you would have a
Yeah.
nemesis system, and if you beat it and it ran off, it would like come after you. It would like, I think it would make its life to try and get you. So things that trying to do things slightly differently. And oh, and the other thing, back in the day, games were simpler, but at least you got the full game on the disc, and it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah.
And most of the times they worked. Not always. If a game was broken, you couldn't get it fixed because you couldn't update it or patch it. But now it's all DLC and it's microtransactions.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So, do you know what? Do you know what really illustrated the thing really well? So, I don't know if you remember, but again, like even when the first Assassin's Creed came out, it was really, really well hyped. And in actual fact, even at the time, I remember Assassin's Creed being really the first one being really repetitive and completing really quickly.
Yeah.
But it was still a really amazing concept, and I think it probably got until maybe like the fourth or fifth one where it started to get really dry. But what I've felt now is that with games coming out moving forward, like I think the Forza Horizon 5 is due to come out this year, I believe.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, I remember seeing some like promotional stuff for it where somebody had got like hold of some footage, and the big like tag for how amazing this game was the reflections in the windows of the car. And I was like, if you're telling me that the biggest detail that I should be caring about that makes this game so amazing is the fact that I've got a fucking accurate reflection of clouds in the back window of the car, you're mad and you should have done better.
But that was it. For a long time, it was in games. It was like, oh, look at the water. Look at how they've done the water. And I never forget, it was one of the rebooted Tomb Raiders, but these are still quite old now looking at it. It was about Lara Croft's hair. It's like, oh, look how the hair moves. And it's like, this isn't what I used to, this isn't what gaming's about. But I get it. Yeah, it's about what is the key selling point. And if it's like a reflection in a car window or how a character's hair blows in the wind.
Yeah, but now that's what I mean. So I think my lack of as much of a pull in gaming is all because it's all about now tiny improvements as opposed to proper innovation. So even concepts for games and that sort of thing, like we're on Assassin's Creed 608. Like, yeah, I get it. Forza's been great, and Forza is a great driving game. But I would just like to see something a little bit different because ultimately, again, the difference between Forza 5 and Forza 4 are menial, and the difference between Forza 4 and
Yeah.
Forza 3 is
Yeah.
again menial. Like, there's just no new pull for me that's kind of saying to me, oh, that's a game that I really need to get. Even with what you said about Far Cry, even
Yeah.
Fallout. I think the most recent Fallout game, in actual fact, was crap.
The online one, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I just
Yeah.
again, I just and that's what I think it is. If you turned around and you had a release similar to that of Heavy Rain or Mag or Mass Effect, but as a different kind of title entirely, like the hype around those series of games were absolutely brilliant, and you felt like you needed to play them because they were something so new and so innovative. Whereas now, I just don't see that pull for anything, to be honest.
Yeah, and I can go through patches where I kind of just I scroll through. I kind of do like Netflix. I scroll through the titles I've got and then just turn it off. Actually, going back to Assassin's Creed, I need to say something that came to mind. I remember again, totally agreeing with you. I got the original one and thinking it was good for what it was doing, but yeah, it was very repetitive. It was
Yeah.
doing the same thing over. And I remember finishing it and trading it. Actually, my partner, she went to trade it for me, and I remember the guy, I think it was Game Station at the time, said, "Are you sure? Because this is going to be a really classic set of games in the future." To be fair, he turned out to be spot on. I mean, right back then. I mean, we've said ourselves, Assassin's Creed 2, the Ezio
Oh
trilogy.
yeah, the Ezio trilogy was brilliant.
I love, that was where it peaked for me. I mean, I enjoyed the new one, Valhalla, but yeah, the Ezio trilogy is where it's at, and also it just feels like maybe companies just are either don't want to take a risk because FIFA X+1 sells and Call of
Yeah,
Duty insert number here sells,
yeah.
or they've got to meet sort of investor deadlines. So we've seen. I mean, for me, I was so hyped for Cyberpunk. I saw
Oh
that for
yeah,
years.
God, the flop that came with Cyberpunk was horrific.
I've not played it yet. I hear, I think they say on the next gen consoles it's decent. I'm sure on PC it's decent. I love the company. They did The Witcher, and I was hyped for years and years. And that's the thing. I don't feel I can be hyped for games anymore because I've seen videos that game was broken on release for a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
systems. Like I said, I'm sure it's deserved. I know a lot of people would have played it and it'd be fine. The company admitted themselves that it shouldn't have been released, especially on the older gen systems. So is it that they don't want to take risks? I've got more fun, I think, playing some of the lesser known games on Game Pass, the indie games, I
yeah.
think, than I have on the AAA games, the so-called AAA.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Like, I've had more fun going back and playing Medal of Honor Rising Sun than I would have done probably playing Call of Duty Warzone even still. And this is the thing. This is what I mean. It's like, oh, you know what? That whole game scandal when it released and it was on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It literally did look like a PS2 game.
Oh, what, Cyberpunk?
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, like when you watch the footage of that game, it looked horrific, and it does beg the question: like, how did they ever think that they should be able to release this with the hype that surrounded it? Was
Yeah.
actually unacceptable.
And even well, was it WWE 2K20? I think that was a really buggy mess on its release.
Yeah, the WWE games have been poor for a long, long while. I think since 2K took over, those games have been really, really poor for a long while as well.
Well, I'm a sucker for a wrestling game, even though I don't tend to watch wrestling. I love a wrestling game, so I did buy it a little while ago. So, but I figured it's so far down the line, load of patches, and to be fair, apart from some weird graphical glitches, I got on all right with it. You shouldn't have to wait 2 years
Yeah,
to
yeah,
play a game.
exactly, exactly.
And like I said, I'm not going to kid you and look back at rose tinted glasses. You did have games. I mean, there are even rumors that some games, because they didn't have enough memory to coding it an ending, so they just made the games extra hard, so you probably couldn't get to the last level. Do you know what I mean? So it's been going on since day one, right? But I think nowadays, yeah, it's just disappointing that games have got all the marketing behind it, but they can be released broken because they know as long as they've got that patch that's going to come out soon, that they can fix it.
Well, it's like even you know what we just talked about Mass Effect and how much we love that series. Do you remember they had to release a redone
It
ending?
was
Was it
Mass
for Mass
Effect
Effect
3, yeah,
3?
yeah.
Because ultimately, again, everybody was so disappointed. So even now, game developers are going into it thinking, well, even in that instance, they turned around and released an alternate ending because they were like, we can still satisfy people. And I feel like there's less care that goes into it because it's true, like you said, nowadays you buy a game, and if you buy the ultimate supreme gold 18
Yeah,
karat
yeah,
gold plated edition, you get all of the downloadable content all throughout the
yeah.
year. Well, hang on a minute. I've paid £60 for the disc. Put the fucking downloadable content in the disc from the beginning if you know that you're going to
Well, do you
release it
remember
over
they
the
called
course
it?
of the
Was it
year.
was it called Season Pass, where when you bought the game, you had a code to be able to play online, and then if you traded it or if you sold it, if you bought it second hand, you'd have to pay £10. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You didn't. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, you
Because you
need
need
to
to
buy the
buy it again.
code
Yeah,
to play online, and
unbelievable.
I mean, and I get it because resale they don't get anything from that. Probably if I look back at it when I
Yeah.
was like a kid of 10, look at saying, right, in the future you're gonna have to pay like £2 to get a new skin for a character or things that you used to unlock from just playing the game. I'd have said, no, that won't happen.
Because loot boxes were a huge thing for a period of time as well. And again, that's kind of why I've been a bit kind of disenfranchised, if that makes sense. Because I remember even like the Call of Duty games were releasing fucking loot boxes. Like I'm just like, I don't give a shit about the
Well, it was the
outfit. Just let me
FIFA
play the
packs that got
game.
that all started, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, FIFA pack. Yeah, yeah, it was, and I think that it was. Don't quote me on this because I'm pretty sure I'm certain. I think it was legislation that was brought in Japan that meant that each game company would need to release the odds if they were selling you something that was like a chance thing. So with FIFA packs, now if you go on the game, it actually gives you the percentage of you getting particular items in the pack because otherwise it's gambling. And so you know what, even that made a bit of a difference because companies realized, well, we can't just stiff people with loot boxes. But there was a period of time where like loot boxes were getting you active benefit in games, with
Pay to
items
win.
that were actually just better in game. Yeah, it was pay to win. And again, I just like I can't get on board with that. I'm like, I just want a good game from release. The only thing that I accept with DLC was I think it was GTA 4, but they released like was it the
Yeah, and
Ballad
there
of
was
Gay
another,
Tony
the
and
Lost
like
and the
all of the
Damned.
expansion packs, but the Lost and the Damned, yeah, that was another one. And those games kind of came with like full on new storylines that they developed, and I didn't mind that because they were giving you content that was super worthwhile afterwards. Whereas now, for instance, you look at like a Forza, they'll get you to sign up for a season pass, and all they do is
Yeah,
put
yeah.
additional cars in it. And I'm like, well, these cars existed when the game was made. Why are these
Pay twenty
cars not in
pound
the
to get the
game?
Ferrari collection.
Yeah, yeah, like your Ferrari Bugatti pack. I'm like, what the fuck?
If I probably put what I paid on FIFA packs and those, I probably could afford a Ferrari.
Yeah, yeah, this is what I mean. This is what I
But
mean.
that's true. It's like, back in the day on the PC, yeah, they were called expansion packs rather than DLC, and it was like a chunk of game. Oblivion, Elder Scrolls Oblivion was one of my all-time favorite games, and I've replayed it recently again. Now it was a DLC. It was like 15 quid, so it seemed a lot, but it was like probably about 6, 7, 8 hours, however long you may last, of content. It was like a little sub game. Do you know what I mean? It was proper content, like you said. It was made to be played, and not just, yeah, we'll give you a new skin for these characters and a shiny sword that will give you 2 XP, 2 times XP for like 30 minutes when you activate it. But I still love gaming, and I think I will always love gaming. It's just yeah, I think, like you said, I think sometimes you can fall out of love with it.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I am a little bit at the minute because I've still set my phone up for Twitter accounts to remind me when PlayStations are in stock, and I've actually
Yeah.
had a couple of times recently a PlayStation in my basket, and I'm sat there and I'm like, but you know what? Can I justify it with how I feel at the minute, knowing that I'll probably play an odd game of FIFA and an odd game of Call of Duty? I'm like, I can't justify spending 600 quid to do that, and it just don't benefit me in any other way because I'm like, well, I've got a Fire Stick that I use for all of my other media stuff. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there might be an amazing game release over the next year, and I'm like, you know what, I need to buy a PlayStation. But apart from that,
Before I finish, just another funny thing is, you're playing a lot of a particular game where. So I was playing a lot of Call of Duty. I think I mentioned in the last podcast that I, on a forum, met, sort of a group of like 5 or 6 lads. We would play Call of Duty all the time, and it was, in the multiplayer, you've got the UAV, so you put the UAV up, and it would say, "Our UAV is online," and UAV is the
yeah,
cheapest thing or the easiest thing to get, isn't it? And one of them, I think it was Modern Warfare 2, possibly, where it was in Paris. You'd have bouncing Betties. Do you remember the bouncing
yeah,
Betties?
yeah,
And
yeah. Bane of your life.
or Claymore is going like planting Claymore or bouncing Betty, and like my other half, she would be listening, and she'd be walking around and repeating after it. It's like, "Our UAV is online, Dan. Your UAV's online." She was, she would just hear it and keep repeating it. And I remember playing Grand Theft Auto, and it was I think Vice City particularly, but all of them since. It's like if I'm playing that when she's around, I can't progress the game because she just wants to listen to the soundtrack. So I just have to
Oh.
drive around Los Santos or something, playing the radio station she likes. And I'm like, I've got to get her a Spotify account.
Yeah, I remember Vice City did have a banging soundtrack as well.
Yeah,
It's brilliant.
yeah. And it's like another one. It was Red Dead Redemption 2. She gets hooked watching the games, like the cutscenes. So like Mass Effect is, I'll keep saying it, I love Mass Effect, and it's very much cinematic. And she got hooked on me playing it because she was watching it for the story it was, rather than
Yeah,
I'm playing for the game. And Red Dead Redemption 2 again is just like that. Now, it helped me actually because I got a bit bored with the side stuff, but the story at the center of it is brilliant. And yeah, she'd just be sitting down and watching the cutscenes unfold because she was getting sucked into the story it was. And so, while we said the thing about games, if it's done right, they can be brilliant forms of entertainment.
yeah, and this is true. I mean, I've even tried to get my mum previously into gaming by saying, look, there are
Oh
probably
god.
some particular games that you'd actually like. Like I always referenced Heavy Rain being a brilliant storyline, more so as a film over anything else. But yeah, I think that
It needs Sylvester Stallone in
yeah, yeah, it would.
it.
Maybe if I turn around and got one of the like, I'm pretty sure they've made Rocky games, haven't they?
Actually, there's one just come out recently. Creed Champion or something. It's basically, it's got characters from all the films. Have a look. It's based on one of the existing boxing games, but they've just put like a Rocky skin over it.
Oh yeah, yeah, I see it. That's it. Creed Champions,
Yeah,
a
that's it.
big
Creed
Rumble
Champion.
boxing.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. My final thing before you wrap up is, I just have to say, I do love gaming. I've been fortunate to see it go through many sort of transformations. Yeah, for all the like the criticism we've said at the end, it's a great way of relieving the stress from work.
Yeah.
And still, still can be like, again, like you and I can jump on and have a game of FIFA or something, and it is still a good way of sort of keeping in touch. Yeah, it's just for me, it's just a world that you can lose yourself in for an hour, half hour, 2 hours, whatever. It's yeah, long may it continue. Xbox, follow me.
Yeah, you know what? When we do plug, maybe we should start tweeting at them, because at this point it's unacceptable. I did actually send them a DM as well, being like, "Look, you don't follow my uncle. You're taking the piss, basically." Maybe we should send them a video of like us burning my Xbox One.
That's not going to get them to follow me.
Yeah, but it'd be like a protesty thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Follow us back.
What's your final word?
I mean, like I said, I think I'll always be partial to gaming. I will get a PlayStation at some point, but at the minute I am just enjoying the classics. And I know that obviously my idea of classics is probably different to your idea of classics.
Yeah, it's San Andreas and Call of Duty 4.
San Andreas and Call of Duty 4.
So, oh man, this retro game, Call of Duty 4, man, that's so cool. You used to play these games?
I'm sitting there looking at like, what on earth, what and who is a Pac-Man?
But we should come back to this.
Yeah, I agree. But like I said, yeah, I think that hopefully I'll get a PlayStation at some point and we can jump on and relive some old memories. But yeah, barring that, I feel like I'm good with my PlayStation 2. But yeah, it'd be good to hear your thoughts on it. Anybody that's listening to this, what have been your best experiences of gaming? What are your best and favourite consoles? What are the most iconic games that you've ever played that always stick out with you? Like I said, Heavy Rain, Mass Effect, all of those, even if they're kind of smaller ones as well. Do send us a tweet at Casting Views. You can pop us an email at castingviewspod@gmail.com. And as always, we know there's been many podcasts from which to choose, but we thank you for listening to Casting Views.